Industry was in a big time threat that nobody will read newspapers. Books will become irrelevant. Great product came in to read books. So similarly, AI will come in. Will it replace HR professionals? Use your brain to use ChatGPT. I could have thought this thing in one particular way. Now I've got 4 options.
Hi, welcome to the myHQ podcast. I'm Utkarsh. I'm one of the co-founders here at myHQ. We have Anurag, who's the head of people and culture at ShareChat. Thank you so much, Anurag, for being here.
Pleasure is mine.
Super happy and super excited to have you here. Anurag, you bring about 30 years of work experience in the HR domain?
If you go by the years, yes.
Okay, yeah. Startup years are double counted, I would say. But thank you so much for taking your time. Would love to understand your journey.
Well, first of all, thanks. It's been a great pleasure of mine to be here, and your journey has been equally exciting, right? And more to talk about that in the coffee break. The roots are from Jabalpur, Madhya Pradesh.
Oh, wow.
I don't know how many of you would be knowing it, but it's a place known for the marble rocks, the river Narmada, and also a lot of cultural vibrancies there. So born, brought up, educated there, and then work took me to places. Interestingly, I didn't started off as an HR professional by choice. It became as a need of the organization later on. So my first job was in Mumbai to sell cosmetics, and this was with L'Oreal, the brand which was coming up
in the sales side.
In the sales side, yes.
Oh, wow.
In the sales side, they were coming up new in India. Was hired there to sell cosmetics at retail shops, wherein the shampoo sachets were the order of the day, and you go and send the bottle of shampoo there. So that's all started. Then sold televisions with BPL, and then moved to Maharshi Group, wherein I was hired to sell Ayurveda.
To sell again in the sales team?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then you had to hire, the Nadi Veds, some of the Jyotishis to be put across in the Western markets where the synergies were. And then while doing this, it was tough to get an HR person at that point of time who was more tuned into talent acquisition, inductions, etc. And I was doing the same. And then, as we say in a startup lingo, the pivot happened towards HR that, okay, let me focus this on more because hiring a salesperson is much easier. And I don't regret that decision. From there on, the journey has been in the domain of understanding people, and people always surprise you, even if you want to count those 30 years or whatever. Still in a learning phase.
Across this 30 years, you've also worked in firms like in Airtel, and then you went to firms like Flipkart, ShareChat. Now you're at ShareChat, sorry. But the journey from, let's say, different corporates to startup, was that tough? I've seen a lot of people unable to cross that barrier from a corporate to like coming to a startup and fitting into that culture. Was that a challenge?
Not sounding cliche, but that was not a challenge to me because, your early upbringing has always take you to the paths where you never know where you would tread into. At a practical level, it's always challenging for anyone. And I've seen people switch from organizations and come to startups, knowing what challenges it will offer and finding it difficult to navigate. But for me, if you see early stages, also BPL and other organizations, they were well-established organizations, and then getting into a totally unknown territory, making a career choice wherein you have not even thought initially that you would make a career in HR. So to me, what drives is, what is the purpose of, my sort of own career, and more importantly, what measurable or visible impact will I be able to drive? And if that is not coming, and that while I was doing good earlier on, that was one of the driving factor that, okay, you're selling and the numbers will only increase year and after year. That will also create an impact, no offenses. But that doesn't excite me, because am I contributing enough to myself? To the organization, yes, but to myself, no. And the sweet spot is when you contribute towards both. And that's where, it becomes relatively easier. But alongside that, when your purpose meets and the impact that you are creating is also a part of the job, but then every startup is a new playground. So adaptability and agility alongside that becomes the key. And I think that's tough. Even for me, the initial phases becomes tougher because again, you have to sort of unlearn a lot that you have already learned. You have to understand as I call it, the soil, the climate, the water, right? Like a plant, you can't plant a sapling which is known to grow in a winter sort of terrain into a place where it is a lot of heat. So you have to create that environment or simulate that environment, right, for that plant to nourish. But for us as human beings, when we go across, so you have to find your comfort alongside the organization that you have gone in, and you have to take those steps first to adapt. Because unlike the other organizations which have that luxury of giving you a sweet time of 3 months of induction, cooling down period, and telling you what works in or here, they will throw you next day, okay, fine, we have got you. And I'm sure you would be doing the same with your folks. Okay, go figure it out. Go solve it yourself. And
there are no training modules in a startup.
And then you have to figure out, the way to navigate yourself. So I think the adaptability and agility is something which is sort of constant, and then becomes that, are you sort of building that trust, right? Because in startups, most important is how fast you build the trust. And building trust is something which takes times or doesn't happen at all at many times. So those are the areas which are always challenging for anyone who's sort of navigating. For me, the first part came natural, that if the purpose is and the visible impact is aligning, that is the reason to sort of join and make those choices.
Impact, agility, and ambition. I think that's
ambition, definitely. Yeah, because
fair.
That needs to align. And
impact and agility, I'd say largely.
Yeah. Adaptability, impact, and agility.
Yeah. Adaptability, impact, and agility are the 3 parameters on the basis of which you can actually succeed in the path. So on impact, one of the things that I generally think about, which is maybe a bit dark, is that I generally think, if I die today, will I be happy, or how many people will actually have a regret, or how many people will actually feel sad that I died today? And I track that as the parameter for being content. And with ambition, I want to increase that number. If that number is 10 today, that number becomes 100 in a year's time, or 1,000. So that's how I generally track that. How many people would I have impacted? How many people would actually remember me for the good things or on that day? And that actually defines the impact, and sort of also keeps me content to some extent.
Well, and you will be surprised to know that that's common in most of the people, in the startups. While putting that, everyone would have a different way. Like you're talking about, on the darker side. And as they say that, can I see my funeral day myself? And how many of these would turn up and talk about good in front of me, right? And suddenly when person passes away, we see that, we would always talk good. Or on a last day of the company, suddenly you're flowered, and person says that, oh, where the hell is this coming from, right? This was not happening, all this, right? And I'm suddenly overwhelmed with the appreciations. And but most importantly, what people look about in the startup journey is what legacy you would leave behind, right? And that's most common, and that's what you're trying
not
to
a darker way,
and then
but
this,
nicely, but
this is the wall. How many bricks I have put in there, right? And which has my stamp, and people, even the same way you said across, that even after leaving me would talk about that, hey, this was a guy who sort of built this. And in almost all startups, you will find those stories, which will be there forever, right?
So let's talk of a journey of a startup, and you've pretty much seen that very closely with the Flipkarts and the ShareChats of the world. Like, how is the journey been from a company of, let's say, a team size of hundreds to thousands, and being at the forefront of it with HR? What are the challenges do you see at each scale? Maybe let's say from 100 to 500 or 500 to 2000 or 2000 to 10,000, howsoever you want to break it up. From an HR standpoint, and how do you kind of?
Look, the good thing is that always, the theories are not there only for theories, but they also have linkages, and we all know, like a product life cycle, the growth journeys, but the sort of challenges that come in, and if at each stage you're getting it wrong, particularly from the HR or people perspective, that's where the success or not so desired success of startups start creeping in. So I would say the first stage, as everyone talks about, is your early growth stage, right? Wherein you have a concept, and from a concept you are making it into a reality, and then from a first set of 2-3 people you get to 10, and from 10 to sort of 100 journey. I call it foundational, right, from a people perspective, because that's where you are laying a foundation of what you are trying to build. The product will pivot, right? Your business model will pivot. But what is fundamental? What brought that initial few people together? And that's the early stage of what culture you are trying to build.
That's not necessarily the problem statement, you'd say.
Yeah.
Fair.
Right? It's not the problem statement, but whatever problem statement you're trying to solve, because you see, and it's important to sort of focus a good amount of time here, because if this goes wrong, consider the foundation. If it is weak, then the facade will break at the end, right? And if you reflect back your own journey or the successful startups, if you want to look at, I think sometimes by default, sometimes by effort, this thing is constantly right, that they were very clear in terms of what is the purpose that would bind us together. We may pivot, the product or the business idea would change multiple times, but what binds people together, the common sort of purpose and the alignment of thoughts, behaviors, and later on you can call it values, culture, whatever. All those are sedimentations, but to me, very basic is the most common behavior that people display together at a workplace is what your culture is, right? And then you can sort of bucket it into different things to understand. So I think that's fundamental, that ingredient should be fine. And then with each sort of scale of growth of people that is coming in, and even from a HR standpoint, if it is initially only talent acquisition, right, that's a forefront, because that's how the journey of an HR person evolves. But if you just get a person who is only doing talent acquisition and getting number of people, then again you are doing wrong on it. And you need to have someone whose core is on talent acquisition, but will also alongside understand that while the talent is there, but will it be a right fit into the organization even at this stage? And then alongside, we start developing, working on what would be, the related procedures that would go, which will be foundational, right? And those are the early set that you define. The second comes across is when you're scaling, as we call it, right? And you've got into a stage where you exactly know that this is what we want to scale from here, and that's where we say from a X to 3X is where you're growing, right? Both in terms of businesses, both in terms of the people. And this is a time wherein we need to work more towards what will help people grow this 3X. While you're getting people, there are people who have joined early, right, who have foundational and fundamental. Suddenly they will see there are certain gaps, right? And the requirements are becoming different. But this is not the time to lose them out. This is a time to, invest in them more. The early stages of, training them or letting them know. Sometimes you don't have the time to train, but even if you tell them that what is required more from you, because you were hustling first. Now alongside the hustling, you have to also develop, how you would manage people, because suddenly a person, you found your batchmate, from your college, and he is coming. Now suddenly he's leading teams and people. He's very good fundamentally. He knows how to scale, but now leading people, managing people is a different challenge. And suddenly you would say, there's a lot of challenges coming from, your team. And he said, okay, but when did I got to know how, most importantly, how do I fast track myself, right? How do I solve? And when they know, and these people are so smart in developing themselves and transforming themselves, right? If they know what they need to do, they'll do it. They don't need any training at this stage. But then the new set of people that you are bringing in, they also need to be told that alongside this journey, you have to keep on evolving. The growth may not be vertical, which you were sort of saying, but the growth can be horizontal as well. And many during this 3x growth are more motivated towards the horizontal growth opportunities that you would get.
What stage would you say that org design, the learning and development, should a company really start focus? I know all startups have constraints, right? So, and it's pretty much, I'll be honest, we are pretty bad at it right now ourselves. And we are a team of over 200 people. So at what stage do you think a company should actually start developing?
When you are, when you move from a foundational to a scaling mode is where you should start thinking and investing about it. I would not link it with the number of people, because some organizations in a full sort of growth scenario will never exceed beyond 500 people, and some will go to 1,000. It all depends upon the size of the business and the criticality of it. So the moment you know that you have solved, you've got into a product or business solution or an offering, which will scale. From here, I would scale and then keep on investing in scaling this, and whatever number of people size, this won't increase in terms of the scale that I'm increasing, or will increase from the scale I'm trying to build up. This is the time you start thinking about it, because I want these people to also, grow in terms of, one is, as everyone aspires for a vertical growth, but we all know also beyond a point you won't, right? Be able to give them. But then what is new skill sets they want to, acquire, what more leadership competencies or business nuances they would like to, you would like them to, get into, is the time you have to invest. Because if you don't do it right, the next stage comes, which is where you have to transform. From a scale, you have to transform the organization once again, right? It's how, it's a rocket ship that is going, right? And it has to then get into an orbit where it becomes a satellite, and then it's moving. And at each stage, if you see, the bulkier rocket breaks into itself.
Correct.
And then that's important, right? The foundation stage, it breaks into a growth and a scale stage.
Foundation, then the rocket, and then the satellite.
And then the satellite. Right? And then every time you would say,
example.
Either it gets leaner or it gets changed. The shape is changing.
Correct.
And if your ingredients are not right here, you might end up then saying that, okay, I need to get more newer people at, say, leadership, mid-leadership level. Sometimes you need it because it's pure growth. You don't have so many people inside. But then you have people who are aspiring, but then you say, no, not good enough, right? He's not scaled. He's not, common words which we all hear, no offenses.
That person has not scaled up.
Right? How did he strategize? Because you wanted him or her to hustle. Never he thought about that, he needs to be strategic, or he has to thinking outside in, or, the inside out perspective, as we call it. And if you invest rightly at this stage, so you have good set of people who are from the organization. Some will change. That is only constant, and we want them to change.
So Anurag, one thing that in journey of a startup, as you mentioned, it's pretty much a sine curve. Every startup goes through places of abundance, places of lack of any resources. And at least what I've seen, most of the startups have some phase of a layoff that's happening. Right? We had it during COVID. different companies have it when there's funding crunch, etc. Firstly, are layoffs like a necessary, okay, not necessary, I'd say. Are layoffs good or bad? Question one. And do they, I think, are they generally like 99% of the startups do have them? Is that a fair statement?
Yes, I would say it's a fair
That's a
statement.
fair statement.
It's a fair statement to make across. Now, what the world has seen post, the rise after COVID, the infamous layoff word is sort of coined in, and some of the organizations which could not do it erstwhile sort of took advantage of the global situation, so to right size their organization or to reach business profitability more faster, and then that's where the way it was conducted, I would say, was not empathetic and people centric, and then that's where it got a negative connotation. But if you look in a journey of a startup, at multiple times it will happen, right? But what it happens is, while the outcome is definitely painful and nobody wants to do it, right? And I've seen and worked with co-founders. The businesses are so close to them, and so are the people. Nobody at heart likes to impact anyone's career, job, etc. But what becomes important is, what is that need for the larger business cause, right? So coming to the recent one later, I would say the first sort of change happens is when the org is going through a change, right? What brought you here will not take you to the next point,
Fair,
right?
100%.
And from there, when you want to make choices, then some of those people will not be required in that journey, and that's okay, right? But then how do you treat them during that phase is important, right? Because it can't be abrupt that, okay, I got this dream last night that these people are now not needed. Well, that realization should come to you 4 or 5 months before at least, and then you communicate, you give them that time, and then help them get across their next role or job, and then sometimes you replace them with a different sort of energy and expertise or skill set that you're needing. Now, that also is a layoff, by the way, because otherwise the people were good. The second term comes in across is, you wanted to do everything right, but then we work in a highly tech-oriented environment, and technology suddenly has changed.
Fair. Advent of AI, maybe.
Anything, right? It can be, you were working on Android, and then suddenly something new comes in, right? Good old days, I call in my schoolmates a generation which has seen everything in technology, right? From the rotatory dial phones to the cell phones now, and organizations like BlackBerry, Nokia, minting money, but then suddenly Kodak, for that matter, right? And then same happens in organizations. While we're not saying you die, but then you are adapting technology, and because of technology, you have to change, right? And then it becomes, then you acquire companies, right? Mergers and acquisitions. Now suddenly you have two people who would be doing the same job, and the size of the business is not that big that you would need two people. Then someone has to go, right? So again, you can call it a layoff, which becomes inevitable. Then comes the last one, which is, you are doing everything right, but then the sort of macro environment is changing so fast. The investors view has changed. Growth at any cost
versus
sustainable growth. And nowadays, even at a very early stage, they want, how would you make money, or when the profitability will hit in, and if that is not coming in. And many of the organizations which are tech oriented, technology driven or services driven, the only way to keep it operating profitable is keeping your people cost under control, right? And sometimes when you have more people, then you think you would generate revenue, you have to take some hard calls and restructure your organization. And all that leads to the infamous layoffs. I think layoffs are constant. We're there, it will continue. And if it is happening for the right cause of the business, and if it is justified, it's just the need, it's the larger need of the organization, because everyone wants their businesses to be profitable in a sustained way. The important is the how of execution. And that's where people make a mistake, right? If you do it correct and make it as open, as transparent to the person who's getting impacted, then it's not that painful an experience for an employee, and most importantly, the people who are staying. Because many times what happens is the people who are staying, they are more worried, am I next, right? Will this happen to me? The person who is impacted has gone, obviously has an experience to talk about.
Correct.
But then this part, is a constant challenge. So that's why it is important that how you manage any such things, which are right for the business, I would say, at that moment. It should be the.
How do you keep the people motivated, like the people who are remaining after layoff?
Yeah.
Motivated. I think if you solve for this, you think the people will still remain motivated?
No, they will not, right? Because now that seed of doubt has been sown, right? So you have to constantly reinforce with more open, transparent communications and telling them about why it will not happen again, right? And also, most importantly, because that's the positive side, but we all know mind thinks negative side first, then the positive side in the reinforcement. So you talk the negative as well. What can make it happen again?
Correct.
Many don't do that because it's the negative side.
No one says that.
Right? And you say that, yes, while we are saying that all is positive, we also acknowledge this side can happen. Why we are confident this will not happen? Because these inputs are going right. But if the moment you see this is not going right, as a co-founder, you can say, come to me, talk to me. Right? If you feel that this input is going wrong, we will correct the input so that this time this doesn't go wrong. Keep us honest. While we will keep you honest, it's a two-way process. And that's where when you do it consistently.
And then there are two school of thoughts, right? One is people who constantly shift jobs, right?
Yeah.
Every 2-3 years. Or then there's another approach of going very vertical, like staying with the same firm for 7-8 years, versus changing jobs every 2 years where you think you've learned some skill sets. Do you any particular views, the pros and cons between the two? What should people value?
You switch jobs if you're very clear. This frequent job switches, if you're very clear in terms of what you want to achieve in a very short term. And for that, you need varied experience of different industries, not the common ones. Or the sort of linear ones that, okay, from here, in a similar industry, I go. And I've seen people in a sort of a, 10 year, they have switched 3 jobs or 4 jobs in different sectors, in different sort of skill set and expertise, and then sort of started something of their own, which they wanted to get some relative experience. There's nothing wrong in that. But most don't do that. Most want to sort of get into a fast track mode. Of achieving something in their career. And we all know that whichever is fast, is short-lived, right? And then they face this mid sort of career crisis. And they're not able to make an impact anywhere because you've not learned how to make an impact. The resilience that comes in with the sort of obstacles, the grit that you put in, because it's hard work, right? Businesses are not built in 1 or 2 odd years, and similarly careers are not built across there. And that's where people need to sort of make that right choices at times in terms of both in themselves and to the organizations that they are making an impact.
What do you think are the top 5 skill sets that an HR really needs to succeed in or have to actually succeed and become a CHRO or come to your level?
Come to my level, I've not reached any level yet, so I would say I'm still a bug.
Or follow your footsteps.
For someone who aspires to be sort of heading in HR or a people function title agnostic, right? I think the 5 key things which I figured out are very relevant to keep you there. First and foremost, I call it founders mindset, right? Second is adaptability. Third one would be empathy and trust. Fourth one would be curiosity, right? And the last one would be resilience.
With the HR, aligning the HR targets with the company larger goals. So, for example, if I tell the HR, let's say hire 10 people, 100 people, like in sales, it's more understanding why those 100 people are needed, what value add it brings into business, and then seeing whether that's the right answer. Is that a fair example? Or if we can give an example from let's just say, any example that you want to give in your past.
I would say the first one is more of a evolved HR business partner who should do that. That okay, why you need 100 people? Why not 50? And why not people from this background? And I understand the targets. I would say the first one which I was talking about is that the moment you are in that discussion table, and that thought is still going on, and you say, you know what, you would need 50 people, sort of org, to build this journey. And then the business person asks you, but what do you think? Why should I get into that zone, right? Why this set of people or whatever, right? Is the people side. Like how, a finance guy or a technology person, when you talk about that, I want to solve this, and the technology person says that exactly this is the architecture we would like to build in. This is how we will build the architecture. Here you will say that what sort of team size you would need, what skills you would need, what complementing experience you would get from market, what is relevant inside the organization. And if you're not giving this sort of team, then you are either are understaffed, or if you have a thought in mind of 100 people, that's overstaffed. So taking it a step beyond from there.
Got it. Do you think AI is something that worries HRs? Is there something do you think there are some skill sets that may become redundant in HR, and maybe there are some skill sets that differentiate that AI cannot replace in HR? I know AI is a buzzword, but just putting it out there for this.
Yes, it's a buzzword. It's a good buzzword, right? And I think the worry is important, right? To worry, to fear about something is a good positive sign to me every time. That if you're not worrying, then you are not investing in yourself and you're not evolving. Okay. The fear that you have that something can replace you, for sure it will replace you, because if you're doing the same things which can be replaced, or your skill set are replaceable by technology, for sure technology will replace you, right? But if you are adding value on top of technology, and you're keeping yourself relevant in what technology would offer and what technology can never offer, and my role starts from there, that I will leverage technology for my benefit, but add on top of it smaller things like, people use ChatGPT a lot these days, right? Another infamous across anything that comes into mind, you would use the ChatGPT to give you an answer.
100%.
Nothing wrong in it. Mm-hmm. I would say it would be only counterintuitive to not to use that tool which is free, which is giving you so many insights. But then don't let ChatGPT become your brain. Use your brain to use ChatGPT. That okay, I could have thought this thing in one particular way. Now I've got 4 options, right, to sort of respond back or reply back to an individual. And now I will apply my mind and choose it, which has my own stamp, right? So maybe I'm not good and great at grammar. So why to learn grammar these days, right? You don't need to. You put in your crude thoughts and your ideas, and someone will do a good grammar for you. Again, you would say, okay, these are complex words. People will figure it out that I never use it on my day-to-day work, because I can't be using ChatGPT in my old conversations. So now I need to replace with the words I use. But now I have got a structure out to it. So that's where I was trying to emphasize that please be worried about it, but also keep on investing in yourself and be relevant. We come from an era wherein, the same buzz was there, that one fine day, .com, when it was at its peak, and the world was sort of saying that everything would be digital. The print industry was in a big time threat, that nobody will read newspapers, books will become irrelevant. Great product came in, which are still great to read books at times, but then still we see after so many years, books are relevant, newspapers are selling. So similarly, AI will come in. Will it replace HR professionals? For most of the skills which are replaceable by technology, yes. But I think the human quotient, right, the sort of emotional intelligence that would bring in, and how to read in between a conversation and then sort of apply your own interpretation to it, is where machines will have a challenge. Why challenge? Because coming with very little understanding of how these models are built in, these are built on large volume data sets, right? So if the data sets are exhaustive in nature, which are, right, and human mind, as we say, has immense potential beyond that, right, and none of that data of human mind can go into understanding how a human will behave, right? Machines are restrictive to their own volume of data that they have, while in business scenarios that is relevant because it is mathematical, it is predictable. Humans are not, right? The same input stimuli, people will behave differently, and it requires human judgment, and that's where the HR roles will be relevant. Probably not in the same way or the same avatar, but we have seen that, right? I've seen the journey of HR, where it was a time office keeper, personal department, to a human resource department, to a business partner, to a people function now, whatever you want to call it. And so will be the roles evolving.
Let's move to another section, which I personally love because it's more related to our business. The role of an office in setting up the culture of the firm. Do you think office plays a role?
Big
in
role.
general?
I don't think, and I have seen that happening, right? Okay. Offices or the office environment plays a very important role in building an organization, I would say. Let's look at little backward, okay, right? We all give what, on an average, no offenses to people who say that, but 8 to 10 hours to work, yeah, in whatever scenario it is, right?
Or 8 to 15 in case of some
yes.
of the firms.
Yes. So 8 to 10 hours is a relevant time that we give to work, right? And that's where we say that, why culture and other things becomes important, because that's the most of the time you are there, right? And the time you would take rest for yourself. So the amount of time you devote with the family and your friends is relatively lesser. It's about the workplace. And when you come to work, right, then there is an environment which is there, right? And that is your office. That's your office space. Now, if you don't invest in that office space, why we invest in house, right? When we take a house, even if we take a rented apartment, we give it a flavor of ours, right? Because that's the time you are spending in. The answer would be that of those 10, 15 hours, how much time? You're going there most of the time to sleep, eat, wash, and then come back again to work and others. But you still invest time. Here is a place where you're actually, if not at the bare minimum of hybrid working, spending at least 4.5, 5 hours.
Fair.
In one place wherein you're interacting, you're communicating, and that has to reflect the culture, the energy, the colors, the vibrancy. Each thing plays a role, very important role. And I would say, I would give whole credit to the office environments created in Flipkart, right, which were very deep, right? A lot of effort went across, spending times with employees in understanding what themes, what colors will resonate with the value, with the common
Wow.
behavior, the energy that will bring in. And if you see the reflection of that, not even in the erstwhile offices they had, which were, on the leased or rentals, but then when the campus came in, very beautifully those themes were designed and put in across, but each color had its relevance, and a lot of painstaking effort went in across, but the outcome was different. When you see across, people would love to go to the office, right? Would love to have those conversations, those pantry, those choice of coffee, or for that matter tea, right? All becomes important and relevant. So yeah, offices play a very important role.
So what were the key things? I'm pretty sure you've set up enough offices throughout your journey. So what were the key things that you generally were very focused on, that these should be right? For example, color is one thing that you've given. Any other examples? Maybe.
Yeah, one is, it should be comforting to people, right? Where they feel relaxed, where there's a lot of brightness also coming in. Sunlight, and if sunlight is not, because all constructions and sometimes, co-working spaces, environments may not give in. So the sort of lighting that you can give it to make it more, brighter and more comfortable, I would say, right? And when people can feel as comfortable as possible, if not home, right? Because it's not a home. Then the important elements comes in, that colors play an important role, right? And the colors should match with what the values, culture that you're trying to drive in. Third comes in across is, there should be enough opportunities for people to break out, right?
Collaborative zones
and break it out. And last but not the least, that that small dry pantry even makes a lot of difference in the choice of snacks that you would put in.
The right tea coffee.
Well, right tea coffee is contagious, right? But yeah, at least these sort of options that you can give in to people is most important.
Any example there of a person not willing to join or not willing to cause of the office in your past hiring?
Oh yeah, that's an interesting one. So, and it led to something totally radical in an organization. So this did happen in again, I would say, in my past organization, Flipkart, and we had multiple offices, and people were, we had made arrangements in each of the offices while maintaining it at common, but then things changed. So there was one set of employee who was working in a particular building, and we asked him to move to the particular building, not very far off in terms of commute. Would have been, a 20-30 minute more commute. And then it was relevant for that person to be part of that. And he said, no, I will not move to that office. And people said that, look, have a conversation. He's saying, and I said, why? What's the big deal? He says that he likes the desk space there. And because it was different offices, the furnitures and settings were different. I said, okay, but how can that be a reason? It must be superstitious. I said, okay, sounds irrelevant. I've interacted with him, and then I went it across. He says, no, this desk is I love it. The best of mind, creativity comes in across. I'm like, is it? And have you tried out there? Well, it will. I know from people. Long story short, in another conversation, he came across. Look, he said that I bring my tea at the desk, have some conversations with the people out here, and that stimulates, that keeps me across. So there is a tea there as well. Well, yeah, I go to that office for meetings. That is pathetic. Like, office is pathetic or tea is pathetic? No, the tea is pathetic. I said, okay, let me taste both the teas, right? And find out the difference and figure out the vendor was different there and the vendor was different here. And most of the people I would see from the other offices also would come and have the tea here. Oh, wow. And we said, okay, while this is easier problem to solve, we'll have this tea in all our offices. And then later on, when the organization moved to the bigger office, the same tea was there. So yeah, tea becomes
tea matters.
Tea matters.
Very, very interesting take. I think we've also seen in our office recently that there was this, early we had this different brand of machine. Now we have a chai point machine. That brings a change.
It brings a change. It brings a change, yes.
And that's why we can see the chai brands doing really well, right?
Yeah.
Because they are actually giving you good quality tea. Quick one, like hybrid work from office or work from home. What works in India or startups?
Well, I would say remote doesn't work in India. 100%. If the organization is global truly in nature, then remote works in. But if the organization is pure India in nature, I think at best is hybrid. Because, you know, the sort of sense of purpose, belonging, right, and associating with the larger organization comes in when you are working hybrid. And hybrid can be also, you know, once in a quarter you come to the office. It's not that you have to come in daily to the workplaces. I think that, and more, you know, I've been talking about this a lot with fellow HR professionals and in different conclaves, etc. And it's coming out very strongly, not because that it's for productivity or trust issue, but it's for that bonding and then, you know, the larger purpose that people want to get associated and be at the workplaces. Remote 100% works in when, you know, the organization type, the deliverables doesn't require you to be, because that work, that purpose is solved by doing a modular sort of approach and then connecting people. And if the environment is truly global, that your manager is sitting in another geography and another team member is sitting in the third geography. So it's by design remote. But when things are there in the same country, the same geography, even there also, I've been, you know, in North America almost every 6 months there. And there also, while post-COVID, I would say people have gone more in terms of getting into a right work-life balance and flexibility. That just for the heck of going to the work doesn't excite me to go it. But if there is something purposeful and meaningful, and yes, once in a while, I do want to, you know, physically meet and have that cup of coffee together and have that conversation, maybe not for work, but for that, why should I go even 1 day a week? I can go 2 days a month or whatever.
How often do you like to go to work?
Yeah, I'm old school. I would love to go to, you know, to work every day. Probably not for the whole day, for that matter. I would, in a city like Bangalore, I would, and I would have always gotten, even before COVID times, my managers or my organizations who would take me as I am. So I would start late in the morning and end up my day late in the evening to beat the traffic.
Beat the traffic.
Yeah, truly remote, COVID was tough for me.
Same here. I love to see faces in person.
And even the house doesn't like you sitting the whole day, right? They also need fresh air that you are out of the office.
Yeah, 100% agreed. As in terms of cities, where do you like setting up an office? Delhi, Bangalore, Bombay, Hyderabad? Any preference? Any pros and cons? What's your first preference?
Well, first preference of late has been Bangalore. Couple of things, right? Ecosystem that the city has developed, right? To sort of, and then my heart lies in startups. I can't work in organized environments. So while I've worked in all cities across, Bangalore gives you that flavor of the ecosystem, wherein you know, it's more cosmopolitan in terms of the sort of choices that you get across of people, the talent that you get in. And most importantly, the support infrastructure, which is there. Yes, it is costlier than some of the other metros. Traffic is a pain, but then the weather beats it. So every place has its own drawback. While Delhi is fast these days, you know, the sort of air has gone too bad. Mumbai space is a challenge. So all good places. I've worked everywhere, but yeah, personal preference today is Bangalore.
Interesting. I somehow have not gotten used to Bangalore.
You should not.
I'm still a Delhi person.
What is more relevant to you is more relevant to you there. One should not make changes for the change of it.
So now some quick fire questions. Any policy that backfired miserably, which you thought would have really worked?
Well, top of mind comes across as in a telecom infrastructure organization, we put in a policy of incentivizing attendance.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Now if I reflect back, as stupid it sounds across, it backfired miserably because the idea was to sort of encourage people and bring people more to workplace by incentivizing the right behavior. They say that don't go on the consequence. If people are coming more to the work, incentivize them more. But the backfire was that people just stopped taking breaks. They thought that, like in a school kid, that 100% attendance and other things, and it had impact on productivity and burnout. And sooner we realized that we are doing more harm than good.
How much time did it take you to realize this? This would not have been fast.
It took a while. So that's why I said it backfired. It took a while for us to understand that, I would say 7 months.
Wow, because earlier you would have felt, oh wow, everyone is coming to office. It's fantastic.
Making across, some incremental money on top of their earned leaves, which were not getting deducted, right? And but then they said that it's having a counter effect.
In 6 months,
we are seeing more people coming in, but then it's not translating across. The engagement survey first was on a high, and then second was total on the dip side. And then we figured out.
Any policy that worked exceptionally well?
Yeah, the one policy that worked exceptionally well was to give people, and each and every person in the organization, and then this was at Uniphore that we said that we would have a culture of continuous learning, and how we can make that happen is that LinkedIn Learning Professional License for dedicated to each person. Now that's a costly affair for startups, right? Usually what happens is you take concurrent licenses and active people have to loan that out. That I've done my learning now, that license passes across. He said no questions asked. Everyone would have a dedicated LinkedIn Learning license.
Wow.
And
which one was this?
This was Uniphore.
Okay.
And then initially the responses were less, but when we started pushing it out, and also using the sort of partner of LinkedIn to how it can make a difference to people, and then the adaptation increased around it. We also gamified that a little bit, sort of a leaderboard, etc., and some healthy peer competitions, and eventually, the organization gave, not to me but to the organization, the award of LinkedIn Learning Champion of an organization of less than 1,000 people category globally, because that was the sort of usage and people were really benefiting from there, right? And the initial the sort of investment that we had made and the ROI I had predicted, because in the boardroom to the CFO you have to make that it still makes a business case. To the pleasant surprise of the organization, we did more than what we would have we had predicted on the ROI. It had a both impact on business retention and most importantly, promoting the culture that you have to be ahead of the curve.
Very interesting. I think that's something that we should also have in our firm. I realized we do not. Good action item for me from this from this chat. Any book or a podcast that you'd recommend to fellow HRs or young HRs coming in this line to follow your footsteps or reach the highest
on the lighter
level?
Side, watch this podcast. Highly recommendable. But well, there are many podcasts. I would say One book which I read very early in the career and it still is relevant, right? And it's a short book. It's by Thomas Harris. I am okay, you are okay.
I have not read that.
Yeah, so do read it. It's a very small book. It talks about the workplace communication and dynamics, right? So it's written by a psychologist, Dr. Thomas Harris, and it talks about 3 stages of transaction, because when we talk, there is a transaction also that happens in psychology, and we operate in usually 3 ego states. One is a child, a parent, an adult, and a parent.
Okay.
And each one of us professional have those conversations, and then basis the ego state that you are conversing, you can make a winning conversation or a losing conversation. And this book talks about 4 quadrants. The best quadrant is I am okay, you are okay, right? But it starts with everyone starts the journey usually with the first quadrant. I am not okay, you are okay, which means that I am inferior.
Correct.
Right? Then I am okay, you are not okay, is where you have a very high ego. And the last one is the toxic one. I am not okay, you are not okay. And in all these, how you sort of deal with people having that sort of zone. And it still, I find it always relevant to refer it back.
Any incident in your company which was sort of scary or funny with your employees or your fellow colleagues? Yeah.
Well, I would say funny will be many. Scary is something which I would definitely like to talk about in this podcast, from not making such mistakes at leadership hirings.
Okay.
Right. And leadership hirings shall never be short circuited to close faster. So won't name the organization, but in an organization we were hiring for a leader to lead a significantly large team, wherein the leader would have an influence on such set of people. And also the need to get someone quick and dirty was there, which always is there, right? And then what happened is, while we had a good panel to look at the person, somehow we found a resource coming from established organizations. So the theory that we all have, and I also talked a little bit about that earlier, was that if you are there for a longer period of time, and you must be doing something good and relevant to stay ahead and move up the organization. If that organization is also known for great people practice and other things, we said let's just skip that part, because he's a leader there, and then would be there, otherwise he's not there. And everyone was so upbeat, this is the guy, we've got him, and let's not lose him out. And just immediately after the discussions, etc., you will go with some bit of other debriefs. We said let's make him an offer. Person also joined, all things great. Suddenly within 3 months we were seeing people changing teams, applying for IGPs more from there, right? And an organization which was relatively cooler in terms of open communication, trust, people were not even talking about it. Why you're changing? Just काफी समय हो गया. काफी समय means 1 year only you have devoted across what's so not happening. And then we found out that not a great cultural fit, and then people were just not liking to work under that leader, and some had tried it, some had moved. And by the time we got this information and the change that we had to make, a lot of damage had happened across. So that was scary. And in that sort of high growth zone, it was more scarier that enough of the lesson again learned wrong way, that never short circuited leadership.